Hello.
We need to turn it up.
Hello.
Hello, good afternoon, Facebook Live. I'm Daryl.
And I'm Charlotte.
And we are the Bakers.
The Bakers.
And so we're just going to wait until a few of you come in, and we really have something that's up on our heart that we truly would like to share with you, share with our audience. And it's not necessarily a popular subject matter. However, it is one that needs to be said and needs to be spoken and shared. Because of the fact that if you're really going to have a healthy marriage, it is important that we remove some of the hindrances. And also, we're going to speak about a subject matter that really needs to be discussed. What do you think?
Yeah, it really needs to be discussed. Before we start, though, I want to remind everyone out there that you can go to our blog and check for updates and information about different things that we're going to be doing. It is www.enrichingyourmarriageblog.wordpress.com. So you'll hear us talking about that throughout this session. So it's 2018, honey.
Yeah, 2018.
Yes.
It seems as though that these years basically have gotten past us, and it seems as though that time is accelerating. And even with that, sometimes you feel as though that you're not being as productive as you so desire to do. And so we really want you to be advised, though, that it's still yet opportunities, for you to make some real progress and make some real changes in your life and also in your marriage. And so it's absolutely important that we are aware of our time and also make the best use of our time, because that is the most valuable commodity that we have, is time itself. And
yes,
so
time itself.
We want to invest our time and not necessarily waste it. So what are you willing to invest your time in? What is it that you're doing today that you know that you are on point? Or perhaps what is it that you're doing right now and you know that it is wasting your time and you're not necessarily investing your time in efforts that's going to reap the most benefit? So that's just a thought.
Yeah, that's good. So we also want to let you know, if some of you, of course, did not make it to this live feed, that we're going to post this on our blog and some other social sites. So don't worry. If you didn't get a chance, we put it out there. If you didn't get a chance or you had something else going on, it's really okay, because we're going to make sure we post it, okay? So we want to get started with this topic. The topic is what, honey?
Infidelity.
Infidelity. Real serious topic, but we felt it was necessary to really bring it up. So we want to give you some general information, and then we're going to just dive in. So let's look at the definition of what is infidelity. Infidelity, according to our basic dictionary, says is when infidelity occurs in a marriage when one or both spouses choose to develop a physical or emotional relationship with someone outside of their marriage. I wanted to give you the dictionary, online dictionary. This type of relationships, because sometimes it can happen more than once, which we'll talk about, can do what to a marriage, honey?
It can hinder the marriage. It can cause brokenness. It can cause distrust. It can cause even unforgiveness. It can be very, very painful to the one that's on the receiving side of such act. And also, it can also damage the future of your marriage, the future of your family. Because when you really came together and you said, I do, for better, for worse, for richer or poor, until death do us part, right? That means that you really have made a statement that you're going to be committed to one another. And so in that commitment to one another, there's a sense of accountability that also must be applied as well. And so when you're talking about infidelity, you're really talking about a serious matter, or serious things that's taking place in the relationship, but most importantly, in the life of the one that is committing such act against the other spouse.
And this is true. And so because this topic is really pretty heavy, we are going to do a part 2 at some point. So I just wanted to put that out there. But I agree. This type of behavior can literally destroy a marriage because you have so many factors associated with infidelity as far as the future health of your marriage, because you're probably having stress, anxiety if you find out about it, when you find out about it. The trust level in particular is ruined, and is really something difficult and hard to get back. And we'll talk about more about how there may be possibilities for things to improve, things to change. But again, it causes a lot of damage, or can cause a lot of damage to a marriage, because now you have two people, whether it's the husband or the wife, whichever one it was, or even some cases it's been both. They have to decide what do they want to do. So we want to get into that. So let's talk about what happens, the opening of infidelity in your relationship. So opening the door to infidelity does not just happen. Not usually, okay? Unless you have a spouse that was already had a wandering eye or had some type of unbridled nature, their nature. So something had to happen. A seed had to be planted somehow. We're going to talk about some seeds that could possibly have been planted. But something was planted in the heart of your spouse. Again, unless this was something that they came into the marriage doing already and you just didn't realize it or wasn't very clear to you, some type of seed was sown. So let's look at some of the seeds, honey. So one simple seed that can happen, people in the workplace, things happen. One of the things is looking at another person. So say, I'm the spouse, which I am, at work, and someone is just constantly looking. And we as women, we have this radar. We know when someone looks at you a certain way in relationship to, them looking at you, not like, hi, how are you, coworker? You know when something is wrong. It's like, we just know it. I mean, men know it too, but I know women, we know it. And one of the scriptures talks about in Matthew 5:28, when it says, if you just look on a woman, or you can say woman or man, to lust after them, you have already committed the act in your heart. Because when you look at someone lustfully and you're just looking and thinking beyond, work relationship or friendship relationship, you're looking at them wondering, what do you think?
The look not only just stops there, it starts there, and it also begins to germinate. It begins to build. And so now the thought process, the desire for that look, and then you're constantly being reminded of what that possible look meant. Now the curiosity begins. Okay, so now it's a road basically that's being established. And if you really don't remove yourself, cast down those thoughts, and not allow those thoughts to take over in your mindset, then of course what begins to take place? A development of action, a follow-up as a result of that look. And so it's important that you really close those doors, because when you have gotten married to one another, each other, you're really saying that this is my life partner, and I want to be able to rely on that person for some guidance and some strength when I need it most.
That's true.
You follow? And so that's the person that you should be relying upon. If there's a void or a vacancy in your life, and then there's an emptiness that you're looking to fulfill, have someone to fulfill that, because someone is giving you attention. Maybe your spouse is not giving you the proper attention that you so desire. So what should you do? You should have that discussion. This is what I need from you. We all have needs, and we all are there to support each other's need. What do you think?
Yes, we're going to get into even more of that towards the end, but that is very important. So be aware of who is kind of like staring, looking. That's one way that we've noticed over the years, just living things simple, something simple like that can turn into something really big. So what about another thing? A compliment from another person that turns into several compliments. Now,
Yes.
People can compliment you. That's okay. But if you see a pattern of constant complimenting, like, ooh, you look nice today, and ooh, it can turn into something else. So that's two. Another one that is a real big one you have to be really careful about is if a coworker or a friend or someone says, let's go to lunch or let's go to dinner. That's like me saying, hey,
I'm
hey,
available. Right,
how are you?
Yes.
To a coworker. I'm looking at my husband, but I'm role playing a little bit here. If I'm not your spouse, honey, right, and I'm asking you to go to lunch or to dinner, how do you feel about that?
Well, you know exactly if someone, okay, men, if someone is really hitting on you and trying to get your attention, because for the most part, women do not go out of their way to establish a relationship except there's some type of interest. You follow? And so we have to understand the clues and not allow blindness to take us down that road of destruction. You see, because it's easy to get into trouble or to make a bad decision, but what type of damage could it cause? So therefore, we want to make sure that we're closing the doors. And so, yeah, it's okay to have a thought, but what are you going to do about that thought? Because sometimes thoughts do enter your mind. So you have to either cast that thought down, rebuke it, and remove yourself from that type of environment. Okay, because that environment is really conducive for you to go down a road and also to commit adultery, infidelity, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so we have to guard ourselves. We have to guard our hearts. Okay,
yes,
because we cannot have everything that we want and everything that we so desire.
That's true.
Okay, so we have to have some type of governance in our own lives to control the things that we are willing to do and unwilling to do.
That's true. I mean, it all ties in. Let's go to another one. When another person pays extra attention to you and you start to like it. Now, you need to really take introspection if that's happening. Whether it's workplace, church, anywhere. If someone starts to take a special interest in you outside of your spouse, I mean like extra interest, you're going to know it.
Absolutely.
You're going to know it. So that's something to be aware of. And then sometimes if someone likes to give you things,
yes,
and keep giving you things,
yes,
and keep giving you things,
yes,
what do you think from a man's perspective? So I'm a woman, because I have to go from that perspective, and I'm constantly giving a man I'm not married to little gifts, like little notes, little cards, if a card here or there, coworker, friend, that's okay. But I'm talking about you start to notice a pattern that every time you come, say for instance you're at work and you see some chocolate on your desk, or you see a cupcake, or you see a little, you mean so much to me. What do you think about that as a man, honey?
Well, when we're talking about sowing seeds, right?
Yes.
So what does that seed really represent? What does that individual want in return? And what is it that you're willing to do? Because we all have to have boundaries, especially when we are married to each other. We got to have boundaries because of the fact that you don't want to bring disrespect, dishonor, to your spouse.
That's true.
It is important that we, seal those doors and then deal with it. And so I appreciate, the gesture, but there's certain things that you're not necessarily just going to adhere to and just give into. Some things, sometimes you have to deal with it right there at that precise moment.
I agree.
I really appreciate, what you're doing, but, I'm going to have to say no, to this particular gesture or something to that effect. Because of the fact that, and especially if the spirit of seduction.
Oh, yes.
That is in operation.
Yes.
Because you can feel those spirits.
Oh, yes.
Those spirits will touch your soul and cause you to respond. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself in that situation, and the enemy will set it up so perfect for you. And because of the fact that you can find reasons and justify your actions because maybe you're not getting the response from your spouse that you so desire, then that is your responsibility to communicate that to your spouse, because that spouse is there to fulfill those needs And if we all have needs, yes, I do understand that. But the point of the fact is that our needs shall be taken care of by our spouse, because that's what we have come together for. We have come together in unity, to be in oneness, to be on one accord, and also to support one another, and to respect one another, love one another, and honor one another.
That's true. That's true. So another one would be flirtatious. Who has ever out there encountered a flirtatious person? It's kind of funny to get that word out. Flirtatious. We all pretty much know what that means. Someone, as he talked about already, seducing spirits. Someone who's always in your face, in your personal space. I said people should not always be in your personal space. Anyone who's doing gestures with their arms, like, I can do this, of course, to my husband, but another man should not be coming up on me or another woman up on him, rubbing on, how are you, brother? Because to me, this kind of rub is not a brotherly rub. This is a wife. I love you. It's endearing. It's no one else should be in this space like that.
Yes.
Because then you're dealing with, like you said, seduction, it's the flirtatious spirit, and then it can start planting again those seeds that you really don't want to deal with. So any of those scenarios, if you or your spouse starts to become interested in those scenarios, it could lead to what? The wrong path, the wrong direction. Because again, seeds eventually germinate, and they eventually grow. So we don't want that to happen. Like he said, we made a commitment as a husband, as a wife, and I hope you did as well, to be committed to your spouse. So that means you have to be aware. You have each other's back, but you also have to be aware. And, as you learn each other over time, you have to know what things work and what things don't work. And then also you have to be aware when you're out in other areas and with other people, who is around you, who's around your spouse. And again, none of this means, of course, do not be paranoid. We're not saying that, of course, in any form, but you have to use that level of discernment to know what you should do. So another thing we wanted to mention, we mentioned earlier about sometimes people may get into infidelity if you go into the marriage with someone who had a wandering eye or unbridled nature, right, babe? That's a whole nother dynamic. And that's why we're also going to probably deal with that in a part 2. But if you marry someone that is really committed to the covenant of marriage, and you think he or she still wants to do whatever they please, they saying, I love you, but I want to do this. I love you, but I want to go here. What do you think about that?
Well, when you love someone, and when you're talking about commitment, when you're talking about covenant, you're really talking about yielding and giving yourself over to that individual, because covenant basically is not contractual, but covenant is a relationship that stems from the reality of wholeness, because you are wholly committing yourself regardless of what takes place in your marriage, in your relationship, the experiences that you may experience. And we know that everything that we experience together in a relationship is not necessarily always easy. It's not necessarily always the fun thing to deal with. But nevertheless, if we're committed to one another, listen, we can get through any situation because we are going through this situation together. I'm not going to dismiss you. I'm not going to disrespect you. But I am going to honor you, and I'm going to trust you, that you have my best interests at heart. And so many times, if you don't really commit it wholeheartedly, and then it is easy for you to have a argument because of the fact that you're not necessarily on one accord. And so you really want to make sure that you're really committed and that you're honoring one another, and that your heart is right, and that you're in it for the right reasons. It's not about what this person can do for me, but it's about what can you do for each other, because covenant is not a one-sided relationship.
It isn't.
It is a two-sided relationship.
True.
And so that means that we have to honor one another, and we have to work together. And so in order to grow in your marriage, in your relationship, you have to be truthful to one another, and you have to be real. and you have to do it in love. Arguments do happen. Disagreements do happen. That's part of life. We're not going to agree upon everything. However, if we learn how to have a discussion, all right, as grown people, have discussions and be able to say what's in your heart to your spouse. Sometimes the spouse is not going to be receptive, but I guarantee you, if you do it in love, eventually they will come around and they will respect you and honor what you're saying. Because if you do it in righteousness, listen, those seeds get sown in righteousness, and it's going to produce a harvest of righteousness. Okay, and so
yeah, I agree, and that goes into something else I wanted to mention. In marriage, I hope everybody knows you're going to have challenges. Things will happen. Okay, that's true, right?
Absolutely.
So because of that, if you have challenges, it brings about stress. If you have communication issues, that's another inroad for the enemy to even bring up those different examples. We talk about being around flirtatious people. It's amazing how sometimes flirtatious people can pick up that you are lonely, or that you're not happy in your marriage.
Yes.
I remember years ago, someone asked me, "Are you married?" And I said yes. And I thought the conversation was done. They continued to say, "Are you happily married?" And I said, "Well, what does that have to do with it?" But again, if I was in the wrong state of mind, that could have segued into something totally that I did not want to do. But because I was in a good place, I knew how to respond. But it's just shocking to me, not really shocking, but to see how the enemy, he can, like I said, those inroads, if you're having communication issues or intimacy issues or financial issues, all those place a stress on your marriage.
Yes.
And when that happens, the enemy, he's always looking for some way to pick at you or pick at your relationship. So he's trying to find just a little bitty space so that he can get in. So like I said, the things that can happen, somebody asking you out. If your spouse is not paying no attention to you, somebody asking you out, it's going to be like, ooh, maybe it won't be so bad. Or if your husband or your spouse or your wife is not paying any attention to you, and then you have this flirtatious person always in your face, then that's how that little path can get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? You think so?
Yeah, that's why it's important basically to keep the enemy out of your space. Because if you don't really deal with the little foxes, those are the things that really can bring about a devastation in your marriage. Okay, it's the little things basically that keeps piling up. And then the frustration begins to pile up. And maybe the rejection, in the marriage begin to take you down a path. And so it's important that we learn who we are. Understand really what makes us tick. What makes us to respond in a way that is going to be healthy for the other individual. And sometimes you may be in a place, in a space in your own life, or maybe you're experiencing something yourself and it's been so traumatic that you have not yet been able to communicate that to someone. But you need to find a third party, someone that is trustworthy, someone that will help you to grow to the next level, someone that will give you wisdom and give you insight, someone that will speak to your destiny and speak life into your situation, someone that will not judge you and mishandle you in those situations because of the fact that you may have had a wrong thought, or maybe you committed something that you really did not necessarily intend to do, but because of the fact that you have not allowed the governance of your emotions to cause you to make healthy decisions, then of course you have to deal with the outcome of those decisions that you have made. The consequences, and sometimes they can be devastating to the individual that you love most, devastating to yourself, devastating to your children. And because
that's true,
your children has a great deal of are impacted in a great way.
Yes.
Right? And because sometimes you don't realize how much your children are paying attention. And that right there, that's a different area that we need to learn how to deal with as well. because children basically are going to reap the seed sown in the marriage because they look to their parents for guidance, for instructions, for understanding, for wisdom. And so we cannot fail them. And it's not about necessarily us or individual, but it's about the commitment that you made to one another.
And so I wanted to add a little different perspective. So some of you may say, okay, this sounds like, I guess it's pretty right, but let's look at what science says, because I like to add a little twist. So there was an article done, it's called The Brain Adapts to Dishonesty. And so what the researchers found was, I'm going to read what I have here, because it was so interesting to me when I was doing this research. It says, any dishonest act that a person may do, whether that's stealing, lying, adultery, infidelity, it affects 3 areas of a person: physiologically, neurologically, and emotionally. Now, why that's important to know is because the study says when this occurs, this effect blocks the signals that will keep you from not doing it. So what it's saying that eventually you're going to increase wanting to be dishonest about whatever you're doing. Whether it's, like I said, lying, whatever, or infidelity in particular, because that's what we're talking about. So, for example, there was a group in this study, they did this test, and they had them lie about something. And what they found, it affected the brain to the point where they could see the different levels in the emotions, what they call the amygdala, which I'm not going to get into that. But they could actually see how those levels increased as they lied. And what happened is, as they continued to lie, so put in infidelity, the response initially was, in the beginning, oh, they felt bad. They were lying about what they were doing. But as they continued to do it, guess what happened, honey? They didn't feel so bad as it kept going. They kept lying, they kept lying. So translation. So when a person does it the first time, he usually feels bad. When it happens over and over again, that person starts not to feel so bad. Now think about that in the context of infidelity. If a person, went into a marriage and they were committed and they slipped up and then it's not addressed, in the beginning they may feel bad. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. But as all those things come into play, the physical piece, the neurological piece, it amazes me how all that works together. And a person's brain can literally, our brains can literally convince us that what we're doing, after you keep doing it over and over, that it's okay. Because again, remember the study showed that it's blocking that thing that would tell you don't do it. The more you do it. That's why when it talks about in scripture renewing your mind, you have to bring everything together, because the seed that's sown here translates to your physical, your neurological, how you feel, because when you're dealing with infidelity, you're talking about a pleasure sense anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you entice that, it's like, I like that. Right? That's good. Your brain is going to eventually convince you, based on this study, that it's okay. So that's why it's so important, again, for us to renew our minds. That's why it's so important for us to remember our covenant with our spouse. That's why we should not open those doors to even get into any of this, because it's so much harder to try to rectify infidelity. Would you agree?
Yes. Think about this for a second. Marriage is the first institution that was created by God himself. And it was the enemy that wanted to disrupt the relationship and the institution that God had put together. So, if you commit a sin and you are sorry about what you did, the decision that you made, that is a great place to be. Mm-hmm. Now you can really turn that shame into a place where you can be forgiven, because the spirit of honesty is upon you at that precise moment, because you have had an element of truth have gripped your heart and a moment of sobriety. Mm-hmm. But if you allow that sin to continuously to be hidden, it gets submerged in your subconscious mind. It gets submerged in your spirit. And all of a sudden, you start making excuses, justifying it, and allow self-deception to come into place. And so, How do you get out of that? How do you get free from it? Now you got to come to grips with the reality, with self. It is so easy to bring forth a message and to make declarations and decrees to someone else, or to reveal or to speak something to someone else in their own life. But it's difficult to deal with the I, the individual, the true self. And so this is what we desire, that you really come into the knowledge of truth, and that you allow truth to reign in your heart. And if you have committed such things and your spouse is willing to forgive you, then there's still yet hope for healing and still yet hope for reconciliation. You can still yet be reconciled one to the other. You can still yet be forgiven. But you also have to deal with the self-forgiveness as well. Because if not, the enemy will keep you bound to a lifestyle of constantly causing you to make wrong and bad decisions. So forgiveness is what needs to be done. Forgive yourself and allow reconciliation to take place in your marriage.
So as
that's
true. So as we kind of wrap this up, we just want to give you also, like he was saying, some practical things. So the key is here. This is a very challenging subject, and so we're again are going to do a part 2, because we're kind of touching a few of the topics, because it could be, if it's something like we talked about earlier, if it's a person came into the marriage with this type of behavior, then that's a whole nother segment that we'll have to deal with. But if you're at the place right now, as he said, where you are experiencing this in your marriage, you got to take some steps towards what you're going to do. Now, the key to all of this is both parties have to want to make a change. Now, we know the offending person, the one that committed the infidelity, they have to want to change, because if that person doesn't want to change, if that person doesn't want to stop, you can't make them.
That's right.
Okay. This behavior will require them to reset their brain, reset their heart, reset their thinking after they have admitted. Because first of all, it's admission. I did this. I don't want to do this again. That has to be real, because shall you continue in sin? Right?
That grace may abound.
That grace may abound. Just because I can repent, I can act. No, but do you really want to change? And so some of the things we want you to consider as we wrap this up is, first, did the offending spouse admit it to you? So if you've discovered it, you're the spouse, say for example, you're the wife, and you discovered something, okay? Did you just discover, or did they admit it? And if you discovered it and they're willing to admit it, how do you go from there? If so, if the offending spouse is willing to end the relationship, there's hope. Is the offending spouse willing to repent, which he talked about, from this type of behavior? And that means doing whatever it takes after repentance. Because again, just because you repent and you don't change, it's not real repentance. Is the offending spouse willing to seek counsel? Because you should probably consider a third party. Okay? Are both parties willing to do whatever it takes to repair the marriage? This is all connected. Are both willing to talk about the possible physical dangers of having an outside relationship? And we'll touch that on another subject, because again, if you are involved with someone else and it's not in a protective, that's a whole nother subject that can be very dangerous, not just for you, but for your spouse. So these are just some of the questions that we wanted to suggest. And then we both, again, say both parties have to be willing. And we would suggest, encourage very highly that you consider a third party. And you can go to our blog if you need more information about finding out information about someone that can assist you with some marriage guidance. And our blog is www.enrichingyourmarriageblog.wordpress.com. And we just want you, if you're in this situation, you just found it out, it's fresh, or it happened even over the course of your marriage, we don't want you to give up. We want you to see what can be done. Again, if both are in agreement, that's good right there. Now, the challenge comes when the offending spouse doesn't want to change. Okay, but let's deal with if they want to change. This is for couples, who want to work on it, who want to have regular communication. Recovery is going to require time.
Yes, absolutely.
Time. And the offending spouse is really going to have to be aware of that in particular, that it takes time, because you have broken a trust. You have broken this, fractured this covenant that you built with your spouse. So don't think it's going to happen and change and be all wonderful overnight. It's going to take time. Both of you have to be accountable. These are some suggestions too, right, honey? You have to be accountable to each other. So you're saying, okay, it happened. I'm willing to change. Where do we go from here? So seek a third party. In the meantime, until you do that, commit to being accountable to each other each and every day. That doesn't mean, again, no paranoia, but accountable, whether it's a note, whether it's a text, whether it's a phone call, whether, you guys should know where each other, you should know where you are anyway, but definitely has to increase. Patterns have changed, so now you got to really be accountable. You need to be honest at another level with each other. The offending spouse must be, again, willing to be patient, whatever it takes to assure the other person that you're serious about mending. That has to be known. That could include all kinds of things like writing letters, notes, whatever it takes. As you, again, got to infuse prayer in this, pray about the next step. But again, if it's a really difficult thing, again, we encourage you to consider a third party to help with that. Because a lot of times the root cause of infidelity is something else. It's deeper than what is actually being seen. The infidelity is just a symptom of something deeper. And so sometimes you won't be able to see it if you're the wife and the spouse. You'll need a set of eyes that is not, that has no bias about what's going on, and will be able to help you in most cases figure out what's really going on. What do you think, hon?
So one of the things when you bring in a third party, okay, it's important whether it's male or female, or if it's going to be male and female. Okay, so don't place that person in a position as though that they should be on your side. All right, they should be on the side of righteousness.
Oh wow, yes.
They should be on the side of truth. So that means that now you really have to deal with the real issues from a different perspective. We cannot just think that someone is just going to agree with our decisions of infidelity and say it's okay. This is what men do, or this is what women do. This is the way I was raised. This is the way I was trained. This has been my environment, and this is all I know. Okay, but when you really want to grow from that perspective, you got to dig deep.
Dig deep.
You got to really, really, really make some significant changes in your mind, your thought process, and also your patterns have to be reset. Patterns have to be reset. Because there were some patterns that was developed that caused you to go outside of your marriage. Okay? And outside of that relationship, now you have to, bring that in, will that in. Bring it to a place of complete change, that you're willing to humble yourself, you're willing to make the sacrifices that's going to rebuild the trust, because the trust has been broken.
Yes.
Okay? And so men, sometimes we have a real issue when it comes to forgiveness, because our brain can't even take the fact and to say that my spouse have been with another man. Are you serious? And then you start comparing yourself. You see, and then that's a danger ground. All right. The point of the matter is that, are you willing to forgive? Are you willing to walk through the process?
Yes.
Are you willing to redevelop the relationship? Are you willing to build again from a foundational place of agreement? And then if you're willing to do that, listen, you are more than conquerors. You can conquer just about anything together because you have gone through the trenches. Now it's time to build and let your life be a testimony to someone else that may have experienced what you have experienced. But God has graced you enough to be able to be an overcomer that you can also help somebody else. Infidelity has been around since the beginning of time. This is not something new. However, this is something society has accepted as a way of life, and it is not.
That's true. So as we end, we want to just reiterate, think about some of those pitfalls we talked about, whether you're talking about a flirtatious person, someone asking you out to lunch or dinner, someone being too close in your personal space. We want you to think about pitfalls that maybe we didn't even mention, that maybe you just kind of didn't see until today. And then make note of those things so that you don't even have to get into this infidelity piece, in the sense of, because maybe you're going through a difficult time in your marriage and you don't know what to do, and so you feel very vulnerable. We want you to know you don't have to step into that.
Amen.
But if you have, there is hope, there is help if both parties are willing. Now, if you have a spouse that is not willing, you still need to seek a third party for assistance. You can't do it alone.
That's right.
You need to know what your next steps
Still
are.
need to be here.
So again, if you want to go to our blog at www.enrichingyourmarriageblog.wordpress.com, we'll have some information there for you regarding marriage guidance. And hopefully, we hope this was it was kind of, like I said, a heavy subject. We just touched it a little bit.
Yes.
So we're going to have to definitely do another part, because we didn't even get into the spiritual ramifications, or even the spiritual implication that happens. Because if this is something that we talked about very briefly, that a spouse brought into the marriage, that's a whole nother dynamic that we're going to have to discuss, because then you're talking about spiritual strongholds. You're talking about things like that can truly take your marriage in a direction you don't want it to go. But that's why, which I don't know if we said this, that premarital counseling is so important. We are very advocates of that.
Yes.
We have information about that if you go to our blog. Premarital counseling helps. If you have a third party helping you before you jump the broom, to identify things that you may not see. Because when we're in love, love, we're usually kind of blind to certain things that are actually there, but we don't see it because we're so in love. But if you do premarital counseling, it can help you find out some things that maybe you missed. So
Yes.
with all that being said, we hope that this was a session that will be helpful for you. Hopefully, most of you are just going to be able to take the information, because it hasn't happened. We're hoping hasn't happened to you, and so you'll be able to look for pitfalls. But if you are in it, don't feel condemned, right? Don't feel ashamed.
Right.
But get ready to do something different.
Absolutely.
Right? So,
not only just premarital counseling, but post counseling as well is absolutely necessary as well, because now you're coming together. Now you have had some experiences together. You have had some time with each other now. Now, what do you do, and how do you really make those adjustments and just move forward in the relationship? Because now you are in the same household, so things are different. Where you're in the premarital stage, the postmarital stage. Now, basically, you do have some challenges there, but and challenges are not necessarily always bad. Challenges are sometimes good because they help you to grow if you're willing, to learn from those experiences.
all right, hon, I think we're going to stop it there. What do you think?
I think we brought it to the end, and yes, and we're going to do a follow up as well. And so we hope that you are able to get something from what we are able to share, and you also we welcome your comments and welcome you to provide some insight as well. We thank you all the ones that have joined us this evening, Hazel, and we have Edward, and I believe there was Davon that joined us early as well. So we appreciate you for joining us. And so until next time, we are still yet talking about marriage and the importance of the covenant relationship, the institution that God designed, and our commitment to one another. So be committed to one another. respect one another, grow from each other, and honor each other.
And look for another announcement. We'll be doing another Facebook Live very, very soon. Again, one more time, our blog, www.enrichingyourmarriageblog.wordpress.com. And this is the what?
The Bakers signing off.
Yeah, out off.
Peace.
Peace.